It is Sunday, the 4th of September, 2016, Labor Day weekend, and I just labored a little bit in rewriting a slogan saying Unitarians misuse blasphemy law to cover up rape. I went a little bit too big on the blasphemy. I see someone reading my other slogan down the other end there, so yeah, they're having a good read. I'm back here. So anyway, this was erased by church members, the previous version, so I rewrote it once the sidewalk dried up, thanks to nice sunny warm weather we have today. And in the meantime I had a conversation, quite a long conversation, with a passerby. Unfortunately I didn't record it because when I'm writing chalk slogans I don't bother running the camera, and she came along while I was writing the slogans, but you know, we had a very good conversation about all of the issues, and she understood, you know, how institutions, not just churches, do you know, do these kinds of things, you know, cover up and hide the problem rather than dealing responsibly with it. In fact, she brought up some problems with Montreal churches, other denominations, and she also brought up problems with another institution, which I will not name for the time being. Yeah, so I had a very good conversation about institutional cover-up and denial of problems, including clergy abuse. And once that was over, we rewrote the slogan. Hello. Okay. So we shall go back to walking back and forth with picket signs, I think, or a picket sign. Or I might write another chalk slogan. Unitarians cover up and deny clergy abuse. Another very truthful slogan that applies, you know, very generally to the whole Unitarian Universalist religious community in America. Probably also applies to Unitarian Universalists outside of America as well, but certainly applies to American Unitarian Universalists, North American Unitarian Universalists. And we're going to grab my unsafe sect picket sign, very legible from a distance, and walk back and forth with it. I see that the tape I used isn't quite as good as it should be, coming away already. Got a little nod from the guy on the he's looking back, looking at the other picket signs. So what do they call those? Hoverboard, I think. Thank you. So I got a nice little thumbs up from the guy. I usually get a fair bit of affirmation from the public. You know, this conversation that I had with the woman, looks like you might be taking a photo or video. If you want to take a picture, feel free. Okay. Oops, a daisy. So here we have Unitarians cover up and deny clergy abuse, so pretty much the same slogan as the other end. And so 3 slogans. We'll leave it at that for now. You know, the proclivity of Unitarian Universalists to erase my slogans. I do have to keep preserving chalk in mind, although I actually have quite a lot. Got quite a lot of chalk in reserve. And summer's coming to an end, so maybe I should write a few more slogans while the going's good, because it won't be possible to write slogans when the sidewalks are wet or covered in snow. Anyhow, it's been quite a good protest today. We've had a couple of good conversations with passers-by, people coming to the church, including a couple of Unitarian Universalists. Thank you, sir. So another little honk of affirmation there. Yeah. Yeah, so I'm displaying my picket sign that says unsafe sect. The previous version of this picket sign soften the blow a little bit by having it posed as a question. In other words, there was a question mark after the word sect. But the guy says, what? He saw the other side of the sign, was a little confused, I guess. But it's entirely true. The other side of the sign says, a church that spits in God's eye. In fact, that references a headline of a Montreal Mirror newspaper article about the beginning of my protest. The headline was, "Spitting in God's Eye." So I didn't come up with that idea. That's an idea that the reporter and or editors of the Montreal Mirror came up with for the headline of the article about the beginning of my protest against problems with the Unitarian Church of Montreal. It actually makes a lot of sense in a lot of ways. I won't go into all the details, but figuratively speaking, Unitarian Universalists spit in God's eye in a fair number of ways. And not the least of them being the way that they responded to me and my claim of a revelatory religious experience of some significance. Anyhow, getting back to the unsafe sect, there's no longer a question mark because it's really no longer a question. It's a statement. The Unitarian Universalist religious community, which can be properly described as a sect, but of course there's a reason for that unsafe sect slogan. It obviously references safe sex. The Unitarian Universalist religious community, or tiny declining fringe religion, to borrow a nice phrase from Reverend Dr. Peter Morales, president of the UUA, it is not safe. It is not safe for people who are victimized by Unitarian Universalist clergy in one way or another. When I say clergy abuse, you'll notice the word sex or sexual is not there between clergy and abuse. And that's because my protest began as a protest against non-sexual forms of abuse. So I tended to use broader terms. I didn't use terms like rape, which I could have. I didn't use terms like pedophilia, which I could have. I didn't even put sex or sexual between clergy and abuse because I wanted to deal with the bigger, broader issue of both sexual misconduct and non-sexual misconduct committed by Unitarian Universalist clergy. But as a result of the Unitarian Universalist Association hiring Stikeman Elliott, barristers and solicitors litigation lawyer, Maitre Marc-André Coulombe, to falsely accuse me of the criminal act of blasphemous libel and Bill Cosby-style legal bullying that's intended to cover up and hide such despicable crimes as pedophilia and rape committed by certain Unitarian Universalist ministers, then that was sort of where the gloves came off in terms of the sexual abuse stuff. And I didn't rush out with picket signs with words like pedophilia and rape on them. I gave the church opportunity to withdraw the false accusation and apologize and tell the truth about just how many pedophiles and rapists they know of within the Unitarian Universalist Church. But of course they stubbornly and obstinately refused to do that. So after so many months or even a year or two, I finally got around to having picket signs that said things like Unitarian Universalists misuse blasphemy law to cover up pedophilia and rape, and basically had chalk slogans to the same effect. It's just not safe for people. I'm not saying every single minister is a sexual predator and so on. Obviously there are many, even perhaps most, who are not. But unfortunately there's a significant percentage of Unitarian Universalist ministers who do in fact sexually abuse people, to say nothing of the non-sexual abuse. And when this happens, the UUA almost invariably tries to protect the minister as much as possible. You know, now there's certain situations where it, you know, becomes impossible to protect the minister. You know, so in those situations, you know, they may, you know, cooperate with police or something at a certain point, you know, after failing to cover it up and so on. But the crazy thing is, you know, even after a Unitarian Universalist minister has been charged, tried, and convicted of the rape of teenage Tibetan refugees, the Unitarian Universalist Association still tries to hide this. You know, that whole blasphemous libel accusation against me was an attempt to intimidate me into removing blog posts that tell the truth about Reverend Mac Wallace Mitchell of the Northborough and Westborough, Massachusetts Unitarian Universalist congregations, who lured teenage Tibetan refugees away from their families in India with promises of a better life in America, and proceeded to systematically rape them over a period measured in years until one of them finally escaped and told her story to some of the church members. And those church members at some point decided that the best thing to do was to report these alleged rapes to the police. Well, what these church members who did the right thing apparently weren't aware of was that the other members of the church, and probably also Unitarian Universalist Association leaders, were trying to cover up the whole thing. They were trying to, you know, persuade the victims to sign confidentiality agreements, which would have silenced them. So, you know, on the one hand, you know, a few church members acted in a manner that upholds justice, equity, and compassion in human relations, which is the second principle of Unitarian Universalism. And another segment of the church, and again, almost certainly UUA leaders, were busy trying to cover up and hide the rapes by, you know, cajoling or coercing the victims into silence. So, yeah, Unitarian Universalist perversion of justice. Now, what's ironic is that, you know, Reverend Mac Wallace Mitchell was charged, tried, and convicted. He went to jail for a certain number of years. And I blogged about his case. And it was out there on the internet. And, you know, one of the reasons I blogged about his case is because although it was known of in, you know, obscure, you know, internet chat places that very few people went to, and so on, it wasn't really very well known. You know, there were a few, I think, you know, web pages that spoke about it. Some of the web pages that spoke about Reverend Mac Mitchell did not identify him as a Unitarian. So they just spoke about him, but they didn't identify which religious community he was from. You know, so I put out some blog posts about Reverend Mac Wallace Mitchell and how he raped teenage Tibetan refugees and so on. And the UUA, you know, in efforts to keep this sordid episode of Unitarian Universalist history as secret as it possibly can, tried to intimidate me into removing the blog posts by falsely accusing me of the crime of blasphemous libel. So, you know, they're still covering up and denying, and even since then, because this dates to June of 2012, I actually spoke to UUA moderator Jim Key soon after he was elected as the moderator, in an effort to ensure that, you know, he, as UUA moderator, took steps to ensure that, you know, the Unitarian Universalist Association formally withdrew its false accusations against me, and that it publicly apologized for falsely accusing me of blasphemous libel and other crimes, and that it told the truth about, you know, just how many Unitarian Universalist ministers are in fact guilty of such despicable crimes as pedophilia and rape. And I had some email exchange with Jim Key, which spoke about the issues and spoke about the Mac Mitchell case and other cases of pedophilia. i.e. the sexual molestation of preteen children. I had one phone conversation with Jim Key early in 2014, almost exactly 2 years ago now. In September, I think it was September 2nd. So this is, just over 2 years ago. Had a conversation with Jim Key in which I spoke about Mac Mitchell, which I made it very, very clear to him that there were cases of pedophilia. Making it clear to him that the accusations that UUA made against me were completely false and needed to be addressed. And then he broke off communication. He was supposed to continue communicating with me towards the end of resolving this most recent problem. He broke off communication. He initially begged off, saying that the friend was dying and he'd like to just, he give me he basically asked me to give him a month or two. No problem. I'd already given him a few months. And then he never resumed communication with me. He ignored all of my subsequent emails. And then in April of 2014, it was announced that the UUA Board of Trustees had voted to issue a second apology to victims of Unitarian Universalist sexual abuse at the 2014 UUA-GA in Providence, Rhode Island. And that the board and it seemed Jim Key would be delivering the apology. Well, based on what I'd experienced with Jim Key, I had my doubts about just how good this apology would be. And I shared my concerns with UU Safety Net. Prior to the apology, I tried to persuade UU Safety Net to take steps to ensure that Jim Key did not deliver a second-rate apology. Just a few days before the apology was to be delivered, or at least maybe let's say a week or two